Am I my fear and anxiety? Am I my trauma? And even though I attended church, I was raised in a house with faith. I went on that faith journey at the same time.
So how your story led you into the fray of the battle for your identity.
And I learned that my identity can only come through the Lord. Then that's who I am, no matter what happens to me, no matter what my body does, no matter if I'm married or divorced.
Hi, and welcome back to Old School. Today we're going to be all over the place, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And our teacher is Karen McCracken, author of Woman Stand Firm. Have it right here.
Oh.
Karen is an inspirational speaker, author, and host of the Woman Inspired podcast. She served as a children's and youth pastor for over 15 years and started the Woman Inspired Ministries 20 years ago. Her passion is to reach women in and outside the church with the gospel message and bring hope, laughter, and biblical insights to women from all walks of life. Karen is a mom, a wife, avid gardener, and loves the outdoors. She's handy in the kitchen. I'm a pastry chef, love that too. Loves to dance while she does housework and enjoys making other people laugh. Welcome to class, Karen.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I am so excited we were able to finally connect. And as dancing with housework, that cracks me up because in my mind, I was raised in Michigan, and
Me too.
we would dance to Motown around the house while we had to do our chores. In my mind, pops the picture of me jumping off the couch with a feather duster to "Ain't No Mountain High Enough."
That's great.
We had fun. I mean, in the midst of the chaos of that was my life, which comes with a lot of stuff, which everybody will find out when they get my book coming out in September. But anyway, it just cracked me up because dancing is not something I want to do publicly, but definitely privately in my own home, as well as singing. Even from that little clip I just did, we all know we don't need Michele singing. Well, I love this book. I look into everyone that comes on the podcast, kind of see their podcasts or their story, their website. But in Old School, what I talk about is the journey to healing and then maintaining that in the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, because it's not a one-time thing, just like forgiving someone or acquiring a character trait like patience or something. You have to do this over and over. When you wake up in the morning, these things have to be choices. So what I like to hear from folks about, especially when they've written something, or maybe they haven't written a book, but they have a story through a blog or a podcast where they've walked through some stuff, and we all have. If you're older than 2, you've walked through some stuff, and you've got a story to tell. And I like that Woman Stand Firm heads into our identity and where to come from. So what I would like to hear, because I know when I ask folks that are, you're way younger than me, but that are more mature, they're like, where do I begin? But I would kind of like to know how your story led you into the fray of the battle for your identity.
Oh, wow. I think that for me, and it's probably for a lot of women and men as well, especially in our culture in the United States, we're afforded so many opportunities to do this, do that, and we're kind of taught, oh, we need to know what we're going to be and what we're going to do, and this is and so that was always in my mind. And then at the same time, you have life that happens, and you have trauma and discovery and physical challenges and mental and emotional challenges. And for me, it all kept rolling into a big ball of anxiety and fear. And I had obsessive compulsive disorder to the point that it was debilitating by the time I was in my 20s. And all of that within itself was kind of battling for, is this who I am? Am I obsessive compulsive disorder? Am I my fear and anxiety? Am I my trauma? And even though I attended church, I was raised in a house with faith. I went on that faith journey at the same time. So for me, figuring out who I was, and instead of going from thing to thing to thing. Oh, well, I should be this because the church says I should act this way and do this, or I should be this because maybe I'll disappoint my parents if I don't. And even though there was no pressure from my parents always said I could do whatever I wanted, I could be whatever I wanted. They believed in me, which is fantastic, but that's a broad, sometimes it's better if we have just two choices. we, we had lots of
It's like
choices.
12 choices of chicken at the restaurant. You're like, ah.
Right. It takes me half an hour to order. So, um, so it was just a kind of a whole thing. Do I just constantly, I felt like I was constantly having to change who I was. I was also just I'll say an avid people pleaser,
Mm,
not a good thing.
no.
And so by the time a lot of things came to head and I went through a divorce in my early 30s, I'd been married for 11 years. There was a lot. And through all of that, I have a condition called vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which causes a lot of pain,
Mm,
which has been a challenge. I've had a brain aneurysm. I have multiple dislocations at various times of my knees, my elbow, my shoulder. Just been working through one with my shoulder, things like that. So all of these things, it was a battle for me to not take them on as my identity.
mm,
And so once I learned and I grew in my faith and I learned that my identity can only come through the Lord, then that's who I am no matter what happens to me, no matter what my body does, no matter if I'm married or divorced, because these labels and titles change. Doesn't matter what degrees I have. You talked about things that you've done in your life and cooking and things like I say, oh, I'm an avid gardener. That's not really who I am. That's something that I love to do.
right.
But that's what we say in our terminology. And unfortunately, especially in today's society, we are told to label. I
Mm,
remember years ago, don't label anybody, don't label. We're back to label everybody and everything. And it's just through my podcast, I saw over the last few years, more and more of my episodes were moving towards uh, back towards the identity issue. And when I would go out and have speaking engagements, I would just have women, some of their biggest struggles and problems had to do with their identity, identifying themselves the way the internet and social media say they should, because they have this picture that's not real, that they're seeing all of these other people. Oh, look at their perfect life. And the challenge for young women, women in their 50s, just pretty much every age. And so the passion kept burning into me. I need to write this book. I need to write this book. And so that's where that came from, for that struggle for myself. So once I was able to cling on to the fact that I am who the Lord says I am, I'm called to do what He says I should do, and all of the other stuff will fall into place. And so if I'm married or divorced, or if this works out or that doesn't work out, if I'm a CEO or I'm a therapist or I'm a chef or whatever, whenever that season fades, or if it fades, I'm still me. That's not my
absolutely.
identity.
Yeah. That the daughter of the king is one title that doesn't change.
Exactly.
And it is very difficult the way people want to put those labels on. I'm 61 now, but I got divorced at around 56, and when I went on dating apps, so you have things you have to answer for the little profile that's on there, and it's very limited. There's this little thing that's supposed to profile that's supposed to describe you, and there are some things that you check off and others you're allowed to put like your words in or something, and you get like 6 to 8 pictures. So this is 100% what somebody's going to see out of the gate and determine whether or not
Right.
they're interested in you, and vice versa. And I get that it, in all fairness, even before dating apps, when we used to go like to church or go out or whatever we did, a lot of whether you walk up to somebody is off of the initial look. But it is amazing what can happen. I was on a cruise this past week with some singles in a Christian online group that I am in, and to talk about what being on those apps and how, like the guys always say the women are all putting filters, and the women were saying the guys put their high school football picture on there. And it's like, but so a lot of people are doing it, and so like, what is the truth? So like you were saying, all of those titles and all of that stuff that we put on the profile, is not ultimately all that we are, our identity. It's maybe how we currently identify in this season as
Mhm.
kind of what's going on in our life, but it is not 100% who we are. And right now in life, everybody wants us to pick one attribute of us, the color of our
Yeah,
skin, our sexual identity, and make that 100% who we are. And that isn't,
right.
I don't want to be just in any of those categories. I mean, I can't do anything about
Exactly.
being, well, that, I suppose you could if you wanted, but I'm a female, I'm white, I'm a Christian, So, where do you like get the world to stop doing that to each of us? And so your podcast would be very well needed, as well as books that talk about that in general. And I love that the way you talked about it too was not just a faith journey, even though that's where you're going with the identity. There are a lot of other aspects that aren't necessarily evil to give us those titles as well. Like you said, by your parents not having something specific for you, it's almost like that was an identity for you as well.
Right, even with encouragement and support, I think, especially, you're in your 20s, you have that mindset. What am I supposed to do? So whether you have support or not, we still all go through that. Our brains are still growing. Our identity, we're not sure what we are, and we're not meant to be on this constant kind of late 50s, early 60s hippie style. I'm going to go find myself trek, because I think that's where a lot of people head. And I've actually met, when I've gone out and spoken on this topic, I've met a lot of women who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, who are widowed, and they wrap their entire identity into being a wife. And because they're not a wife anymore, they feel lost. And so that's kind of where the danger is. So like you said, it's not just a faith journey. The identity journey affects everyone, no matter what your faith is. And for me, being grounded in my faith and knowing who I am in the Lord, that solved the identity crisis for me. And so I felt like that I have to share that. I absolutely have to share that. That's part of the journey. And I love what your podcast title is and how you do things, because when you said, oh, well, here, she's going to teach us, Karen's going to teach us, because that's how we learn a lot of things, not just by trial and error, which most of us are so stubborn, that we want to do it ourselves, but to listen to other people who've been there, done that. And I think it's our job, as women of faith, to whatever we've been through, to turn around and reach around and help others to come through it, to come through the same thing, and say, hey, no, 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 come here. Here's a little bit of a guiding light. Try to walk this way instead of this way. And that's why I started the woman inspired book series. And the first one is Woman Stand Firm. And the book that just came out, and you showed a book, I actually have it right here. It's Woman Let Go, Release the Grip of Unforgiveness.
Mm.
And it's about, and part of, I realized when I was writing this, is that part of the reason that I needed to forgive myself, which is one of the most difficult types of forgiveness to give, it was because I was so confused and so messed up with my identity. I made choices that I would have never made if I'd have known who I was. And so forgiving myself for those choices, that were not good choices, that was part of my journey. And so this is kind of like the next step to my journey, is releasing the grip of unforgiveness, because when you don't forgive yourself, or you're holding on to unforgiveness against someone else or somebody who's done something wrong to you, it can completely alter your decisions in life. It can completely alter the path that you're on. And it's so freeing to forgive. And I have to tell you, I've been very shocked. And so, pardon me for a little bit of plug, but my book stayed number one for 7 days, in Christian counseling category. And it's still going strong right now. It's number two today, and hot new release, still on the number one. And I just didn't realize how much that topic would affect so many people. I knew what I struggled through. So I felt like, okay, this is what I'm going through. I want to share it with other people. I feel led. This is what I'm passionate about. But I just had no idea what an issue it is, and how and which I really feel, I shouldn't feel shocked by this. And in retrospect, I think, why does this surprise me? Because if you look around our culture today, we're living in a time where people are generally on a daily basis completely intolerant and unforgiving of other people like mad. And that's one of the things I address in the book is daily forgiveness and understanding for other people. And so I'm so thankful that God put me on this journey to, because I have been blessed by people like you who have podcasts who share uh, their stories and other people's stories. And I'm a huge reader. I love to read. I've been blessed by other people. So my hope is just that in telling my stories and sharing other stories, like in this book, I share some amazing stories of forgiveness that other women have shared with me, things that they've had to forgive that I can't even fathom
Mm.
having to forgive in my life, the trauma and the drama, and how they were able to do so. And so that's been a huge blessing to me because I've learned from them, and I hope that other people will learn from me.
Part of the description of my podcast is something my daughter could finish this sentence for me. I didn't create this quote, but I just use it a lot. Is a smart man learns from his own mistakes, but a wise man learns from others. And like you were saying, these stories need to get told so people understand um, the forgiveness in my world, and a lot to do with my book. Um, the forgiveness of what happened to me when I was little was almost immediate. Like my first strongest memory of abuse was a beating I took at 2 years old. And I remember, I know I don't know the words for God or evil or whatever, but I just remember sitting on my bed, watching my father go out the door, thinking that was him. That wasn't me. That was his choices. And my whole life, until my divorce, I never went to a counselor and never had anybody physically check me out or have counselors, but I feel like I ultimately had the counselor my entire life because I can watch with each wound, with each incident, I can see how I was grown through it so that then the next thing I could make those choices differently. And as you talk about forgiveness, absolutely everybody I run into wants to know if I forgave my mom, if forgave my father, all this stuff. But the
Hmm.
toughest one was me.
Yeah.
Um, Two particular incidents. I had my first boyfriend, first sexual experience I got pregnant from, and it was like Roe v. Wade may have been out 2 years or something, and he had frequent flyer miles at the uh, Planned Parenthood, and just swooped me up, and I again I had to consent to this happening, but um, years later, fast forward to me having my daughter, and I'm standing over her crib waiting for SIDS or something to happen because I didn't think I deserved having her. And I went through this Bible study this woman did for women who had gone through an abortion, and it was like I had a tumor removed without anesthetic to finally forgive myself. And really just life altering moment for me. And then with my divorce, my daughter was 15, and she came out of her room the day I threw my ex out and told me that she felt lied to by everybody, including me. And a lot of my friends take offense for this. They were like, "You were protecting her, all this." But I don't think we are protecting them by letting this discord and unhappiness and all of this stuff just going on in the house and not talking to them. And so she didn't feel like she understood how bad it was. So I had to take that on. And I said, "You have every right to those feelings." And I acknowledge them. And I was on my face before the Lord for months as I was walking through the divorce and having to find the space to forgive my ex, forgive myself, and really heal. And that's where all of it is. There's like a second book that is coming out of all of this to follow up the first one, because the first one goes through most of my life up through like college. I just didn't feel ready for the divorce to be in that one. And the Lord kind of
Right.
showed me that. But yeah, that layer of forgiveness, and I think especially as women, I don't know. I don't know men struggle enough, but I think especially as women, we tend to not want to forgive ourselves because we also are looking at how did my choices impact my kids, somebody
Right.
else, did I screw this up?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree with that. I mean, I really feel for what you said. It's one of those things where sometimes you feel like it's for me, it's easier to forgive other people. Like you, it seems like my whole life I've had just a forgiving nature. And but I used to have this thing where I was stuck on the forgive and forget, and we're not told to forget.
Yeah.
It's the Bible says the Lord forgets. He casts our sins as far as the east is to the west, and he doesn't count them against us anymore once we're forgiven. So we have this human assumption that we're supposed to forget. But how do you get your brain to forget? God forbid you have some sort of disorder or diagnosis and you forget things. But other than that, we don't forget the trauma and the drama. And one thing I talk about in the book is some of the things that I've been through. Even though I've forgiven people, I would feel guilty because I couldn't forget. And then I realized, wait a minute. I'm not supposed to forget, and I'm supposed to learn the lesson. If all we had to do was forget, we wouldn't have to come up with the compassion and humbleness to forgive, because we would just be
Well,
gone
and
from
then
our
the
head.
next time you go through that, I mean, I think the key thing you said
Yes.
was that the Lord, forgives and doesn't bring it up again. I don't think he
Yes.
forgets clearly, but I
Right.
think that's the thing is that your true forgiveness of somebody else or yourself is not bringing it up and beating them over the head or beating yourself over
Mhm.
the head constantly with it. And it is not a one-time transaction. I mean, I
Correct.
told my ex the day I had threw him out, I said, I forgive you because I can't carry this. But it didn't mean that there wasn't days where, as the divorce was transpiring, that I didn't want to just clobber him. Like, okay,
Right. Right.
let's get back to.
Well, and it's interesting is you say that because, and it's so true. And but we get stuck and we feel like, okay, yeah. So God doesn't hold it against us. He's pardoned us, which means he forgives us without exacting punishment. But we tend to want to punish other people and retaliate and all of that because it says it says in the Bible, oh, we don't. Well, when Peter asked Jesus, how many times should I forgive? And he ends up saying, well, even up to 70 times seven. Well, I used to think, well, hey, 70 times seven, 490. So the 491st time I can smack the crap out of somebody.
So we
And
start counting.
that's right. So, but that's not what it means. And I know that seven is considered the number of perfection, means that the calmness and stuff. But what in researching forgiveness, what I realized that I discovered actually on some on a rabbi's page, and then kind of dug even further into some Christian information. So 70 times 7 is 490 in Hebrew, which is an alphanumeric language. The 490 is the word tamim, and the word tamim means completed or finished. And when Jesus said 70 times 7, I don't think it was an accident. I don't believe in coincidence. um,
It's
490, and
finished.
that's what Jesus said when he died on the cross, is it is finished. So we're supposed to be forgive and be finished with it. And that was the example we had, and that's what we're being told, and that's hard to do. But that's what I talk about in my book, and I give steps on how to do that. I also put I the first book, Women Stand Firm, I had women asking me, well, is there a workbook with it, and or a journal? And I'll be honest with you, I am not a workbook kind of gal. I'm a write in the margins and highlight kind of a person. But I had so many people ask me that I did a forgiveness journal to go with
Mm.
Woman Let Go. So there's a journal, so you can actually tell your story, so that you can share your story. So it kind of guides you through each step. And I think a lot of times we have so much going on inside us, like the trauma from that we might have grown up with, and craziness that we put ourselves through from not knowing who we are and coming to who we are and trying to learn to forgive, that we hold it against ourselves and we don't know what to do with it. So I kind of put these steps in there, besides the steps of how to forgive, but signs that maybe you're holding on to unforgiveness and you didn't realize you were.
Yeah.
And so I try to go over all of that. But one of my favorite quotes, you talked about quotes, one of my favorite quotes is unforgiveness, holding on to unforgiveness is like drinking poison
And hoping for
and waiting for the other person to die.
yes.
So, and it really is because it poisons. I even talk about health, physical health, because it's been a big, I try not to get caught up in my flesh, but a lot of people know when you have something that is a challenge and it's a constant thorn in your side and you're having to deal with it physically, it adds another component to your life when you have pain and you have things that you have to take care of. But you know what? Holding on to unforgiveness towards yourself or someone else, it can greatly affect your health.
All of it.
So
It's so
yeah,
intricately tied together, the physical,
yes,
mental, emotional, and spiritual,
right.
um, that I did a master class on cellular healing, and like the top 5 categories of toxins, anxiety is like number 2, and it's not, people laugh and say, okay, I can go out and do breath work and I can do grounding and all of that, and all that's great. It's definitely helpful, but anxiety is very much a mental and emotional thing that then
Mhm.
impacts us negatively physically. And
Absolutely.
I had 15 years of infidelity and 8 rounds of counselors and all of this stuff, and so forgiving was tamped down on me, and repentance wasn't in there as much. So, that layering of it could have easily driven me to a place where I'm at 491. You know what I mean? I could
Right.
have said this, that's just it. I mean, I didn't want to hear one more person tell me that if I kept praying for him or if I would pray for him, I couldn't be mad at him at the same time. And the funny part is it wasn't even mad. Our pastor did a message a couple of months ago, and he made this comment that the opposite of love isn't hate or like anger, it's
Mhm.
apathy.
Oh,
And
I so agree. That's
at
great.
some juncture, it was getting to a place where I was being so rejected and so non-reciprocated that I have to admit that my marriage ending had to do with the fact that the infidelity wasn't going away. She wasn't going away. But I was not in it to win it for probably the last few years either, because I just could not hold him in high regard any further. I wasn't holding myself with any value. So yeah, forgiveness, it goes both ways, and you have to, wake it up every day. Every day you have to address it. It doesn't mean that, you're going to suddenly forget, like you said, everything that's
Mhm.
transpired, for sure. But that was a very big learning curve, and unfortunately took too long. And one of the things that came out of that was I didn't feel like I had a good answer for my daughter or for anybody or for myself as to why I stuck around that long. And everybody wants to, in church circles, and Christians want to say, well, you didn't want a divorce, you wanted to stay married and all. And I'm like, yeah, but still, I don't know that it was just that. I think it was something to do more to do with me than literally the outcome of the marriage, to be honest with you. But anyway,
Yeah. It's
I
interesting
love it.
that someone would say to you that that you can't be angry if you're praying for someone. I don't even think that's an example in the Bible. I mean,
Well,
think
at the
that's an even
same
greater time to
time,
pray for
that like
someone
if
when
you're
they're
bringing them
angry.
before the
Yeah.
Lord, you can't be cursing them at the same time that you're praying
Well,
for them, I guess.
okay, you
Yeah.
can't be cursing them, but you can definitely still feel
Well, yeah,
feel the anger. But I
especially if
also
you're
don't.
saying something like "get him." No.
That's right. It's like, please let him get a flat tire today, Jesus. Please let no. And I
Let
think
him go
that's the
prematurely bald. No.
I think that oh boy, I've been there. So, but no, and I think that the big thing is when we are able to forgive, we to release that thought and those incessant things that where when it's quiet at night and you're getting ready to lay down and then all of a sudden that thought comes into your head and you want to quit playing a scenario. Oh, I wish I'd have said this, or if I see him I'll do this, or if I if that person says anything to me, I'm going to do this. And to also not go down this trek of retaliation
Absolutely. Yeah,
in
you
our
can
head,
go
because
down
we
the
were,
rabbit
I don't know
hole.
about you, but yes, yes. And I think we were, when I was younger, and actually I'm not that much younger. I'll be 57 in a few months, so
Oh,
I'm not that much younger than you. But it was like the whole mantra of don't get mad, get even.
yeah.
That's what we were raised with, right? And you know, just putting that to bed and saying, no, that's not even something that I need to entertain in my mind, because it would be so easy that 491st time, hey,
Well,
I got
and
a
the funny
plan.
part is it really justice? Are you really even? Because
Right. And it's
why
not.
would going out and I don't know, maybe me going out and cheating, that seriously makes us even? You know,
Right.
because it made me miserable. So why on earth would I want to go do that is some way to rectify for myself even? You know, no, I just want to be done with having to put up with this over and over and over and no longer see any effort for this to stop or to be reconciled with me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that to me personally was a grace God gave me because I know He hasn't changed His mind about marriage. But if I had not, I didn't pray about my ex husband. We were unequally yoked when we got married. So I can't sit here and go, that man you gave me, God, like Adam did with Eve. I have a very good emotional awareness about my marriage. There were signs before we even got married of infidelity. There was just, I don't sit here and say, God, let this happen to me. Like,
Right. Right.
so yeah, I can't hang on to that. And there's no, I wasn't raised, let me take that out of it. With all the abuse from my childhood all the way up through my divorce, there's just not been a part of me. And we're all born with a sin nature, and we could all do whatever. I could have cheated, I could have, done whatever. But I just never thought of any one of them wanting to go like, beat them or set them on fire.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm so glad. I feel better now in
None of
this
that
interview.
sounded like it was gonna make me feel better. In fact, what
Right.
was very interesting is my daughter coming out to me like 2 days after he was out of the house, and my daughter said to me, I need you to know that this is the most peaceful this house has been, and I really need you not to try and get back with him for me. And I was in my head, I was going, oh, hell no.
But kids know, you said earlier, we shouldn't, we shouldn't lie. We shouldn't try to cover things up. Kids know, they're observant. They know not just the feeling in the house and whether there's peace in the house or what someone's countenance is, but they hear more and see more than we think they do.
Absolutely.
And the thing that I've discovered with our kids is, if we don't address it, if they've only heard part of something, they will think it's something else.
Yeah,
So if we don't bring it out, they could inflate it in their head and turn it into something that it was never meant to be in the first place. And then that adds to worry or anxiety over them, rather than if we just, so we're big into, okay, the whole family's going to talk. We're going to discuss. We even have safe words in our house. So if someone is having a bad day or they need respite or something from everybody else, they're allowed to say that, and then we address it later, because we have a child who's not a child anymore. He'll be 27 shortly, special needs adopted son, and so we all had to learn to grow up with to raise them, I mean, with different safe measures, mentally, emotionally. It was a
absolutely.
very long trek for us, and I think part of my forgiveness journey too came from having to come to a place where I could forgive him, because even though they're cognitively and emotionally and intellectually, sometimes he didn't understand what he was doing or saying. There are times that he did, and I was his target. So I'm actually his fourth mom.
Oh, wow.
He had birth mother, foster mother for almost 2 years. They didn't think he was going to live. And then my husband and his first wife adopted him, and they'd been married 16 years. She passed away from cancer. Um, then there's me, and then her mother passed away from cancer, and then my husband's mother passed away. He's had a lot of female loss, so I am his comfort zone, share everything with me, because I ended up adopting him as well after we got married, but also his target for anger.
Mm.
And so he's broken my arm, he's
Oh
bloodied
my.
my nose. When he, especially when he's younger, he has a lot of rage, and it's been a real long journey. And so to be able to not excuse everything, but just genuinely forgive, is has been, that was a real journey for me, and I talk about that in the book, because it's, I'm not the only parent, and special needs or not, I'm not the only parent that hurts from their child's behavior or treatment from their child, whether we've contributed to it or not. um, we're oftentimes a target. And so being able to heal from that so that you still have a family relationship and a dynamic that's healthy and Christ-centered, it's extremely important. And I know a lot of parents that I've met through speaking engagements. I mean, I speak all across the country, and it doesn't matter if it's somebody who is low income, high income, middle income, from the West Coast, East Coast, middle, corn country. So many parents go through the very same thing, no matter how their child has, what their child's capacity is, developmentally or anything. They get hurt, but they hold on to it instead of forgiving, and it forever changes their family dynamic.
And they have to see you. You have to talk to them, like you said, but they need to see that you're not just words. And my
Yes.
daughter, when she had come to me and talked to me about, she had turned off the TV in a room and cracked the door to hear us through one particular counseling session where the counselor was screaming at me,
Oh my gosh.
just some stuff. And so I did have her come out and sit down, and I said, I'm giving you a free space here. No matter what it might do to me, I need you to know that you can tell me whatever, because I don't want you imagining what's happening or thinking that you were to
Smart.
blame or any of this. I want to get all of that out. And then once the divorce was final, she came to me and said, I really wanted you to be madder at him. And she said, but you weren't. She said, you kept telling me that I needed to maintain a relationship with my dad. You kept being gracious. And she goes, I just need you to know that the way you handled all of this is been an incredible example to me. And I just was like, because you don't know. I feel like I failed miserably for staying that long and not protecting her by keep getting her out of that kind of, I mean, it
Mhm.
wasn't physically violent or anything like that. And it really, even the arguing wasn't this loud screaming, and there was no throwing of anything. It was just that it was chronic. It was 15 years worth. So anyway, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that if we leave them to their own devices to think about this stuff, it could be incredibly detrimental for them and their future relationships to not know that this is how something should be handled, or this is what was actually going down.
And that's something I've always said to the kids, always, and actually, my son, the one who's special needs, he's a character. He's a really good sense of humor, though, I have to say. But and he can be super charming, but he can also be very angry. But he doesn't like it when he hears things that he doesn't want to hear, and none of us do. So when he was younger, he used to cover his ears. He didn't want to hear if he was being told no or something like that, but he always knew. And I always said to him, and I'll even say now, and like, I'm going to tell you the truth, no matter what it is, whether you like it or not. I'm going to tell you the truth, because I felt like that was the only way to deal with him, because I don't know sometimes how information gets taken in. He takes in information, and his brain works differently than mine does. And it comes to him, to his heart and spirit, in a different way. And so I always, and even now he'll say, I know you're going to tell me the truth, whether I want to hear it or not. But he knows so
But
there's
that
that
that's a
consistency there.
consistency. It's
Yeah.
either you tell him the truth every time or you tell him a lie every time. But if you mix it up, then it's really going to be inconsistent.
Right.
So at least if in his mind he knows every single time that you're telling him exactly how it is, then that's a anchor. That has to be an
Right.
anchor even for anybody who processes. I think we all process differently. We process
We
through the
do.
lens of the things we've been through. And so
Sure.
people think I should like hate men considering what I've been through. And I'm like, I don't think every single man, I think every single human is born with a sin nature and has the propensity to do anything. But I'm not going to put on any future man that God might have for me all of this crap. It's just not fair. Now, could they? Could I date somebody and they go cheat on me or lie to me? Absolutely. But I don't believe that every single human is just going to do that. I'm just not going to do that. I've been forgiven, and I don't want somebody putting on me my worst day. So,
That's great. I mean, that's so wonderful because like you said, you've been forgiven, and that's something we have to remind ourselves that we're not worth forgiving either, but we're forgiven, and we're told, we're commanded to forgive other people. And so that's like I said in the book, I don't want to I won't go, wouldn't have time to go through all of it, but there's some women in there, one woman in particular who uh, lost her daughter and grandchildren by the hands of another man, of a man, and her trek to forgive. And so I have her story in there as well, and it's just being able to talk to her. And this was something that years ago. And the crazy thing is, and I mean, I say crazy lightly. I say it in a, not in a mental health way, but it's just unbelievable that our world is this way. But she's not the first woman that I've met whose daughter and grandchildren have been murdered.
mm.
And they came to a place of being able to forgive.
Yeah, when you see those stories on the news,
Mhm.
it is, as a believer, I have to believe that I would be given, I have the 100% of the God of the universe, the power that raised Christ from the dead in me, that I could do that as well. I would not test God by saying I could never do that.
Yeah.
But it is overwhelming to watch and see the power of Christ just be able to help somebody do that. And for them to understand that it's absolutely about their their heart and
Mhm.
their soul not carrying that burden for the rest of their life. I have
Yeah.
an only child, a daughter, and so if anything that like what happened to me as a child were to ever happen to her, I just feel like I would just, I'm only 5'6", but I might then I might hurt somebody.
Yeah,
um
exactly. I think it was great because this one woman that I'm talking about, would go back to her anger, was not just over the loss of her family, over part of her family. She was angry at God, not because God didn't stop it, because she said, people have free will. She was angry because it said in the Bible that she had to forgive. She was angry that God would make her forgive. That's so she had to work through that anger before she could get to the point of forgiving. So it is a process, and it takes time. But that was where her anger came from, because she said, he doesn't deserve my forgiveness. And she was angry that God might be able to forgive him if he repented and he came to the Lord. And so I talk about that in the book. It puts a whole different aspect on forgiveness when we think about those layers of it. It's not a simple topic, but again, I think it affects everyone.
Deeply. Well, this has been so much fun. I have enjoyed having you on and hearing about, both the books. I'll have to get the other one as well. I that your episode is going to be coming out more into the summer, but maybe we can have, start up another research. I'll have all the links in the podcast notes for you. I do
Okay.
end every episode by asking my guest that for that nugget, this one thing that they wish they had known sooner or someone had told them sooner.
I wish I had known when I was younger that not forgiving myself would alter the path that I took in life.
Hmm. So real.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that it's a topic that we cover a little lightly, and everybody wants to kind of point out the stuff in the Bible, like how many times do I have to, or this or that. But the reality is, it should be how many times do I get to? Because how many times did
Mm.
Christ's forgiveness get poured out on us? Yes, it was a one time, he went to the cross, but I'm just saying, every day we have to come back and ask him to just let that be a balm for us. So why wouldn't it be just as much so when we put it towards others as well.
That's beautiful. I love that. Can I also say, and however you want to use this or not use this, another thing that I wish that I had known when I was younger, that is that if someone has wronged me or hurt me and I forgive them, it's okay for me not to have them in my life.
Mm.
I can forgive someone and love them and pray for them at a distance, but I don't have to allow that toxicity in my life.
Access denied. It's,
Yeah.
you took care of it. If they want to come and apologize and make that kind of reconciliation between them and the Lord, yay. But you don't have to go camping with them anymore.
Right.
You
Right. It
nope.
took me too long to, and I would just set myself up to be hurt again and again and again. It took me too long to learn that. I wish I had learned that earlier.
Me
Yeah.
too. Well, I just want to thank you so much, Karen. I want to thank you all for coming to class. All of her connection information, her books, her website, her podcast, all of it will be in the show notes. I would love it if you love what's going on here at Old School, if you would go to the platforms, review, rate, download, maybe make a comment, and let's get some engagement. It all makes me more searchable and get our stories out there to more people. So I just want to thank you all for coming to class today, and class dismissed. This episode of Old School with Michele Vrabel is brought to you by Skin Beautiful AZ.